Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Top 10 video. And today's Top 10 features George A. Romero. Now, George Romero is one of the most influential American directors of the 20th century, but strangely you probably won't find his name on the list of the greatest directors of all time. And even myself, I wouldn't put him on the list of the greatest directors of all time. But he is one of those directors that is influential because he almost kind of reinvented a genre by himself, beginning with the letter Z. But he is one of the most kind of revered and flat out loved directors. It's very difficult. I mean, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about George Romero. In interviews, he just seems like such a nice man. So even though he might not be upper echelon, certainly his influence, I think, is continually seen. His fiercely independent attitude, which may have got him into trouble on some studio projects whenever he got involved with studio films. But I think his work will stand the test of time, because again, even though he was a genre filmmaker, he did have satirical points of view, he did have political points of view. It's kind of funny when you think of Romero and Cronenberg and Wes Craven and Tobe Hooper. These guys kind of made, horrible films, but they're all like some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, allegedly, and generally soft-spoken and mild-mannered, and not kind of the drooling degenerates that you might think, or critics might think from watching their films. There's actually a lot more thought and intelligence going on, even though they've worked in genre filmmaking. Originally from Pittsburgh, he made his films in Pennsylvania. And again, Jacques Tourneu's I Walked with a Zombie. You could argue Carnival of Souls. But it was obviously Night of the Living Dead that pretty much blew the doors open of what we could kind of see as far as quote unquote gore or realistic gore. Because even though Romero worked in genre, he worked in horror, his films are grounded in reality. There's not a lot of, fantastical worlds and things like that. It's always grounded in reality. It's always situations that have, to some extent, happened in the past or could happen without too much of a stretch of the imagination. I mean, we're all still waiting for the zombie apocalypse. There's websites and books telling you how to prepare and how to survive a zombie apocalypse, when no doubt our resources will run out fossil fuels will run out. And as somebody once said, we'll be fighting over rice. So even though the films in this top 10, you know, from a distance you could argue maybe only one or two of them reach kind of greatness, very much like early Cronenberg, you do feel that Romero sometimes didn't create his full vision for budgetary reasons, for limited acting reasons, but again, very much like Cronenberg's early work, the ideas in his films, the way his situations and characters could get under your skin, I think will stand the test of time. So again, this is just my order with top 10. Again, please leave in comments below your top 10 Romero films and let me know what you think of George Romero as a filmmaker. So we're just going to start with, at number 10, a collaboration with another master of horror, as they used to be called, Two Evil Eyes with Dario Argento. This is a double bill which was made a little bit later. I can't actually remember. 1990. So it's, I would say one of the later ones, but it's 29 years old. That's quite a shocking stat. So it's split in two parts. Romero's half is first, and it's the better part. And it's loosely based on an Edgar Allan Poe story about a corpse who might not actually be dead. It stars Adrienne Barbeau, who's at one point was John Carpenter's wife, and was obviously in The Fog and Escape from New York, and she was also in another Romero film which is on this list. And she has a dying husband. She's having an affair with the doctor, and obviously she would quite like her husband's money. So they think the husband is dead, but it doesn't quite work out like that. Again, it's only about an hour long. It has nice atmosphere, but again, it's not the Romero film that you automatically go to. This is the nice 88 Films edition of it in the Italian collection. It's number 43 in the Italian collection. It's a lovely print. It has an interview with Kim Newman, which is always well worthwhile. It has an interview with second unit director and Caroline Munro, and it has Italian opening and closing credits, a trailer, and it's also got the Italian audio track as well if you want to watch it in Italian. So that's Two Evil Eyes. Next on the list is the second one with Adrienne Barbeau. This is Creepshow, which is another collaboration, this one with Stephen King. And this is a fun portmanteau film set. The kind of framing device is essentially a comic book, and it has some nice episodes, even though it has a quite silly one starring Stephen King and some green vegetation. There's a nice one with an animal in a cage from the Himalayas with Adrienne Barbeau, which is quite handy for getting rid of problems. There's a nice Leslie Nielsen Ted Danson episode. But again, this is more just a nice bit of fun. Romero's not particularly saying anything in this film. but it's just an enjoyable, fun little ride. This is the Scream Factory. Nice addition with a nice booklet as well. That's Creepshow. Number 8 is a new release. It's The Dark Half. This was actually out in the UK on Monday past. So this is a Region B. Again, this is a later Romero. It's 1993. And again, it's a well, it's not a collaboration. It's based on a Stephen King book about the creative process. Timothy Hutton stars as a writer who has a kind of proper upmarket writing career, but he also writes as a pseudonym, and he writes kind of trashy, pulpy, kind of detective adventure stories, and through certain machinations he decides to kill the character off, but there seems to be somebody who doesn't like the fact that he's killed the character off, and they start killing people in his life. Timothy Hutton has fun with the role because obviously he's playing two characters. This is one of those examples of a film within the studio system, and again, Eureka have done a very nice job of extras. There's a commentary with Romero, and there's a nice episode of Son of the Incredibly Strange Film Show, which in the UK again was one of those programmes, I think it was late on Channel 4, that I saw a lot of films or a lot of filmmakers, presented by Jonathan Ross from 1989 about Romero, and Ross goes to Pittsburgh and interviews Romero and Tom Savini. There's a 36-minute retrospective making of, which Romero kind of explains the problems with the studio and things like that. So again, it's not a great film. Again, it's a more fun, but you can kind of see what Romero was trying to do. Obviously, it is one of those films which is about the difference between commerciality and art, the question of selling out. There's some fairly gruesome deaths in it, and you know, there's nice support by Amy Madigan, and Michael Rooker actually is a good guy, which is a little bit off-putting. He plays the cop and it's like, that's Michael Rooker. So it's a very nice print. Eureka have done a nice job kind of bringing it back, but again, it's not really the finished article, but it's certainly worth checking out, and you will have fun with it, even though the premise is obviously a bit silly. Next on the list is one of his zombie trilogy, and it's Day of the Dead, which obviously is my least favourite of the three. And again, it's probably because, you know, it's a story of scientists against the military down in a bunker while the zombie apocalypse is going on, and science is trying to find a way to either tame the zombies or a way to reverse the process. There's a crazy doctor doing experiments which are very graphic and entertaining, and then you have the military who is fed up. The military just wants to kill everybody and get out of the bunker. Again, my problem with this is the military are just so horrible and just so abusive towards everybody, that again, when people die in zombie films, you actually want, you know, to be upset, to actually have a reaction. But these guys are just so annoying. You're not even excited when they die. It's just like, just get them off the screen. I just feel that he didn't have to make them so completely annoying. He could have just dialed it back a little bit. But I mean, their attitudes to the woman, the female scientist, who's the strongest character in the film and the best character in the film, even though some people might actually argue that the trained zombie is the strongest character. But just the soldier's attitude to her is just really annoying. And again, I just think in that situation, yes, they would be annoyed, yes, they would be frustrated, but I still think they would have some level of, I don't know, just structure and following orders, so they would still be just not as completely disrespectful and not completely out of control as they are in the film. Again, it's desperate measures and desperate times, but I just feel those characters could have been dialed back a little. You could have still made them annoying and aggressive, just without going that far. Obviously, the effects by Savini and his crew are the most explicit and the most gruesome in this. And again, it is the bleakest one of the trilogy, even though they're all hardly laugh fests. But for me, it's because of those military characters that it's only at number 7 in the list. So that's Day of the Dead. This is an Arrow Steelbook. So next on the list is one of the Romero films that's been remade. It's the 1973 film The Crazies, about a biological outbreak. This one's on Arrow. I mean, it is good that most of these films are available on Blu-ray. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah, The Crazies, it's about a biological outbreak and the containment of it in a small town. Again, there was a remake with Timothy Olyphant, which was actually quite good. But this one, again, because it's low budget, because it's grittier, it's more realistic, it is kind of bleaker, and because of the certain condition of the characters at the end of the film, it's actually more human and it's kind of more moving than your average outbreak film where the military comes in and just starts executing people. It, again, like I was saying earlier, it's a very grounded film. It's in reality. It's very believable, and again, even with perhaps limitations in budget and perhaps not the best performances, I was actually surprised at how affecting this film is, and it is kind of perhaps one of his forgotten films, because again it was made in between Night and Dawn of the Dead. But if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it because it is an affecting little film. That's The Crazies. Next on the list is another slightly later Romero. It's Monkey Shines from 1988. Again, this is on Eureka. And again, they've done a really nice job with this as well. They have a feature-length commentary by Travis Crawford. They have a feature-length commentary by Romero. There's a very good making of documentary with George Romero, which again, this was a studio film, so there's, you know how that goes. There's an alternate ending, deleted scenes, and there's a nice booklet. This is the moving story of a man who's paralysed and is embittered with the world, and he gets a trained monkey to help him around the house, but then the monkey becomes possessive and people that annoy him start having accidents. And it's a really nice study of, again, a relationship between animals and nature and science, and test subjects, animal cruelty, animal testing. It's quite a claustrophobic film. It's pretty much mostly shot just in like one house, and it's just a really nice film. Again, this is a film I hadn't seen for years, if at all, until recently, and it is actually an impressive little film. Good solid performances, a nice script and nice points to be made, and again I would highly recommend picking up the Eureka Blu-ray, because again they've done really nice work. Monkey Shines, an experiment in fear. Next on the list is Knightriders. Again, this is an Arrow Blu-ray. This is, again, I think I saw this on BBC Two's Moviedrome when I was a lot younger, and it was just one of those films again that has got cult written all over it. That's cult. It's essentially Camelot on motorcycles. A very young Ed Harris plays the leader of this travelling band of kind of artists that recreate lance duels and medieval times, but instead of horses they use motorbikes. It sounds corny, but it's actually a really good little film. Again, it's perhaps 10-15 minutes too long. But again, it contains Tom Savini's finest performance as the Black Knight. Ed Harris has this kind of glow to him. There's a kind of almost religious zealot kind of look in his eyes, about because he truly is committed and believes in this idea of Camelot. Of course, there's the commerciality and selling out raises its head again as Tom Savini wants to splinter off and take his troupe to do bigger shows and essentially sell out, which Ed Harris doesn't want to do. I mean, Ed Harris is just fantastic in this. Again, it's an early performance, but this kind of gives you a good taste of what Ed Harris would become. It's an odd little film. Again, it's got cult written all over it, but if you can find it, again, it kind of seems like perhaps a daft premise, but you do actually care about these people. What happens at the end is you need to see it. It's just a beautiful, strange little film. It was Romero's most personal film. It was apparently Romero's favourite film that he did. And as Ed Harris says, there's an interview with Ed Harris, and he pretty much says a lot of the dialogue is essentially just George Romero telling us what he believes, as far as, you have to stand up for what you believe in, and you can't compromise, which again was what his career was about. I don't think anybody could say he ever sold out. He always tried to stay true to who he was, and I don't think many directors can actually say that. There's just a tremendous integrity about George Romero, and I think that's one of the reasons why he is so revered and loved, even if his body of work might not contain, masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. So number 3 is one of the most influential American horror films of all time, or one of the most influential American films of all time, period. It's Night of the Living Dead from 1968. One of those films that it would be great to see it again for the first time, because the first time you see it, there is something visceral about it that kind of just gives you a reaction in the gut. Again, this Studio Canal print is awesome. Also there's a Criterion release of it as well. Please let me know in the comments below what the Criterion print's like in the extras. Again, this was his first film. It's a simple tale of a group of people who get trapped in a house and they're surrounded by what we now know as zombies. Again, the enemy within is worse than the enemy without, or something. There's levels of gore that we never really saw before. Obviously it was rare at the time. There's kind of a black lead in a genre film. Obviously Assault on Precinct 13 with John Carpenter would come out a bit later. Obviously the ending of the film, in the same year that Martin Luther King was assassinated, Kennedy had been assassinated, it has kind of taken on more kind of, more political, more socio-political readings, as this group of hicks just go around the country shooting the zombies, and unfortunately shoot our lead actor. I don't think I'm spoiling anything. I'm sure most people have seen Night of the Living Dead. Groundbreaking film, influential film, still essentially the template for the zombie genre, which has lasted to various degrees of quality this far, which is now over 50 years. Yeah, it's one of those films that you kind of, the first time you see it, it's like, did I actually see that, or did I dream it? Or it's one of those films that will always, perhaps having a really sharp, nice print of it isn't actually the best way to see it. Maybe we should watch it in a kind of shaky, fuzzy VHS copy. Night of the Living Dead. Number 2 is Martin. This is Arrow DVD. Now apparently Second Sight are possibly releasing Martin on Blu-ray. I do know there's a Japanese Blu-ray, but I'm kind of hoping that Second Sight release this on Blu-ray. Again, this is a Romero film that I hadn't actually seen up until probably last year, and I was really blown away by it. Again, It's early Romero, so it's low budget. Again, shot in Pittsburgh. And again, the acting at times can be patchy. But the wonderful main idea of a character who may or may not be a vampire, who has delusions of being a vampire. He moves in with his uncle, and his grandfather, who's obsessed with Nosferatu and is convinced that Martin is Nosferatu and wants to save his soul and destroy him. Martin is a confused young man who has trouble relating with women, and he performs a series of attacks where he, drinks blood. But is it all in his head? Is his grandfather just completely off his chump? It's just a nice kind of twist on the vampire genre, because we never really know whether he is a vampire or not a vampire. And again, it overcomes the low budget, because again it just has that really nice feel, that grittiness, and it's just a lovely little film. I would highly recommend. And again, hopefully Second Sight will actually be releasing it on a nice Blu-ray with lots of lovely extra features. So number one, you can probably guess what it is. It's Dawn of the Dead. This is an Arrow Blu-ray. Again, Second Sight are apparently going to be releasing a Blu-ray of it at some point. I've seen pictures of them doing extras and recording extras on social media, so hopefully perhaps this year, not this year, probably next year, this will come out. Dawn of the Dead was made in 1978. No, it wasn't. Not 1978. Was it 1978? 1978 or 1975. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. Let's say 1978. I think it's 1978. Essentially following on from Night of the Living Dead, it follows three characters who escape the city and end up in a shopping mall where they have everything. They don't have to struggle for it. And the zombies are there because they only remember the things that were important to them, so they go shopping. And it's that struggle between, you have everything you need, but you don't have to earn it. There's no struggle in having it. You can just go into the shops and pick up whatever you like. So they end up needing, the living actually need the dead to give themselves a bit of excitement. But then of course their paradise, their Shangri-La, is interrupted when a bunch of bikers, including Tom Savini, turn up and all hell breaks loose. It's full of obvious social commentary. Again, it's Romero having another dig at consumerism and commerciality. Growing up, it was always, which cut of Dawn of the Dead can you find? Because there was always a cut version on DVD. I mean, I've bought probably 2 or 3 different versions or 2 or 3 different copies of Dawn of the Dead, only to find it's the shortened one. It should be about 2 hours 20 odd, but there's versions that are 2 hours, there's versions that are 2 1/4. So that was just part of the collecting to try and find the actual proper cut. There's actually a Dario Argento cut on this. So there's a theatrical cut, there's a director's cut, and this has a third disc on DVD of the Argento cut. And there's a bunch of, well, Document of the Dead is kind of the classic making of. It's just a wonderful package by Arrow. This one's out of print, but again, hopefully Second Sight will be releasing a new edition of Dawn of the Dead, which is just a lovely little film. And again, I've still got the theme, that banal musical jingle in the mall. It's just in my head all the time. Yeah, I maybe need to see somebody with that. So thanks very much for watching this top 10 of George A. Romero. Again, please leave the comments below what your favourite Romero films are, how you feel about Romero, where you would rank him in the pantheon of directors, and hopefully we'll see you again for another top 10 video. This is Solitary Ronin, apologising for any rambling and not knowing when Dawn of the Dead was made. I think it's 1978. And hopefully we'll see you again. This is Solitary Ronin saying farewell.